What is growth in a startup venture? Well, this may seem obvious at first glance, as most companies are measured by the size of its workforce or the number of employees that it has. Well, with this, startup ventures aren't really measured based upon the size of its workforce, as well, famously, Instagram was purchased by Facebook, now Meta, for $1 billion, and at the time it had only 13 employees. So it's certainly not the size of the workforce that measures a company's size or growth in the startup world. Total revenue. Well, that is a metric of growth for most startups, and it's generally the number one metric. If a startup is increasing rapidly in revenue, and it's important that we distinguish between revenue and profits, because most startup ventures are not profitable for some time. That is because any profits should be reinvested in the growth of the venture, as the venture by its very nature is growth-based. So any dollar that's profit and not reinvested back in the business is in essence an opportunity wasted, as you could reinvest that dollar to produce more than that dollar in value. And that's the essence, again, of why investors put money in a startup, because their money has the potential to create more value through growth. So a growth in revenue is the number one metric for determining whether a startup is growing. Other than that, some startups may not produce revenue initially. They may be searching for a revenue model in the future, but at present, they are perfecting their business model or the means by which they deliver value to the customer, client, or end user. The revenue model will come later when they figure out how to translate the receipt back of value that the customer, client, or end user is giving to them, which is not always money. Sometimes it's simply eyes. Let's go back to the example of Facebook. Facebook provides a valuable service to anyone who wants to use the platform. In return, the users share information about themselves and are an audience for marketing on the Facebook platform. So Facebook can derive value from selling marketing space with specific demographic targeting to anyone who wants to advertise on that platform. So you would measure the growth of that startup early on, even if they are not producing revenue, in terms of the number of users of the site. Okay, number of transactions. Some startups, and every startup is different in how it operates and what is its business model. Some startups focus on transactions, that is, how many exchanges or how many recordings or how many downloads or how many visits or how many renderings it produces. Okay, these are just some examples of value delivered to the customer, client, or end user, and each of those would be considered a transaction. Now, in a transaction, there's an exchange of value. Well, it may not be that any revenue is produced yet. You may not be able to count simply based upon users, because a single user may use the platform to some varied extent, often or infrequently. So you might measure it in terms of the number of transactions that the startup is involved in. That would be a good metric for growth for some ventures. And then lastly, brand reach. Some startups simply attempt to achieve some level of brand recognition, that is, recognition of the company, its name, its product line, and the value proposition that it's offering. So with that being said, oftentimes an expanded brand reach is the number one factor to determine whether a startup is growing. You might think in terms of celebrities who use their celebrity status or their influencer status. Their growth might be in terms of people who follow them or are aware of what they do or their value proposition. As their brand awareness grows, then the value of what they offer and can generate grows. So all of these things are viable metrics to determine whether a startup is growing.